Before we begin, late last night, I secretly launched the new Eckhart's Ladder merch store. It was time. We haven't gotten a merch refresh in years, and I just realized pretty much everything on my old store was sold out. So I've got a ton of limited stock, brand new merchandise, and I'm taking this very seriously. I've got a ton of designs being worked on, everything from posters to shirts to stickers. But if you want to check out what's there now, there will be a link in the top line of the description. Also, you may see some of the products under this video. With that being said, let's roll the intro. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So yesterday I was doing that video on the Skip Ray Blast Boat, and like I always do, I was looking through some of my old Star Wars texts, and at the end of the new Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, I found a relic from a bygone era. It was this full-page ad, the last page in the book, for LucasArts. It featured 4 absolutely classic now at the time, popular games, including Knights of the Old Republic, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, Rogue Squadron 3, and Star Wars Galaxy and Empire Divided, which was the name of Star Wars Galaxy's base game. I'll admit, I've got no experience with Galaxies. I've heard phenomenal things, but there was no chance my father was going to let me play any game which had a subscription service. Anyway, I really stopped for a moment upon seeing this, and all I could really think was, we did not know how good we had it. All 4 of these games came out in just over the span of a year. The earliest was Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, which came out in March 28th, 2002. Then the other 3 were released in 2003. I don't really think this video has a purpose. If it does, I haven't discovered it yet. I just want to talk a little bit about my childhood experience playing Star Wars and kind of how sad things feel now. It's pretty remarkable. I was born in 1992. This was like the dead era of Star Wars. Obviously, the prequels were just over the horizon, but in the years before that, I certainly didn't know that, and the original trilogy was in the past. Part of the reason I fell in love with Star Wars as much as I did was not only the movies, but the excellent video game options which were available alongside my probably favorite system of all time, the N64. I don't have a whole lot of experience with prior Star Wars games, except having went back and played them as an adult. Games like Super Star Wars, for example. But the N64 really made a lasting impact, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say without that console and the games I'm about to discuss, I wouldn't be where I am now, good or bad. So the N64 released in 1996, and that same year we got my first ever Star Wars game, Shadows of the Empire. Shadows was cool because it was a plot contained within the movies, within the original trilogy, but it was still a separate story. It's set between episodes 5 and 6, and I thought it was really cool that you interact with characters like Luke and Leia, but you're providing additional context, and later, watching Return of the Jedi, I would think about the adventures the good guys went on in that in-between era. I, at the time, did not appreciate that Shadows of the Empire, the video game, was a part of the larger Shadows of the Empire multimedia project, and I blame my parents because I definitely would have read the comics and novel had I known they existed. Either way, aside from Shadows of the Empire, there were 2 other N64 games I played a ton of. Star Wars Racer was fun, but quite difficult, and there was Rogue Squadron. I loved Star Wars Space Combat from the time I first watched Episode 4, so this game was right up my alley, despite the fact that you never actually fight in space in the first game. Rogue Squadron was also quite difficult, but with the Farm Boy cheat, you could fly the Millennium Falcon, which had a powerful shield and easier to fire weapons, so I was able to beat that game even as a kid. I also was able to beat Shadows of the Empire, although only on the easy mode. By the way, one thing I didn't mention about Shadows earlier is the game throws so many different scenarios and gameplay styles at you, from space combat to snowspeeder flying, to on-the-ground combat, and more. Either way, there were other Star Wars games for the N64. Those were my favorites, however. The next big Star Wars gaming moments in my life, however, came in what I honestly call the golden era, and we got just a quick look at it. There were the 4 games that I just mentioned, all released between 2002 to 2003, but that just scratched the surface. Now, I was relatively limited because I only had, at the time, an original Xbox and a really cruddy computer, but I had friends, and even on Xbox, there were some really great choices. I remember in 2003, it feels like almost everybody I knew, and we all had Xbox, by the way, because of Halo CE, got the Star Wars The Clone Wars video game. Also, I just remembered it came with Tetris for some reason, but I'll admit, as an adult, that game wasn't great, but given the context that it was released alongside so many other games, including some which are the best ever, like Knights of the Old Republic, we were just happy to get it. Although KOTOR was a standout, and the story of Knights of the Old Republic still, to me, is the closest, perhaps, Star Wars has gotten to emulating the feel of a movie outside of the original trilogy, maybe right next to the Thrawn trilogy anyways. To me, as an adult, though, I think my favorite game of the era might be Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. That was another game that, as a kid, playing on Xbox was very difficult, but if you finished it, you didn't have to wait long, because next year we got the follow-up in the final game in the series, Jedi Knight 3 Jedi Academy. It's actually not usually called Jedi Knight 3, even though it is. The full game title would be like Star Wars Dark Forces 4 Jedi Knight 3 Jedi Academy, but I digress. Lucasfilm and its partners wisely continued pumping out video games as Star Wars was resurgent, and 2004 saw the first entry of another great series, Star Wars Battlefront, as well as the KOTOR sequel, The Sith Lords. One criticism of this era, and perhaps of Lucasfilm generally, is that they really rushed sequels. The Sith Lords needed another year. Battlefront 2 really needed another year, as did The Force Unleashed 2. But again, we were getting so many varied experiences, not a single one had to be perfect. 2005 saw Star Wars Republic Commando released. I'll admit, I'm not a fan of this game now. The UI is great, I don't like the gameplay, and I wasn't a fan back then. I've done a whole video on my thoughts, but I always compared, for some reason, Republic Commando to Halo. Halo really, releasing in 2001, ruined a lot of other half-baked first-person shooters, but in 2005, I also played a load of Star Wars Battlefront, and I remember getting Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, beating it in one sitting, and I just replayed it last year, and it really holds up. Things do start to slow down a bit in 2006, though we got Star Wars Empire at War. I'll admit, I couldn't play Empire at War growing up. My best friend Brandon had it on his computer. I played it as much as I could there, although usually we played Age of Empires. But as an adult, it may be my favorite Star Wars video game of all time, behind perhaps Star Wars Squadrons. Star Wars gaming since then has really lost its way, and I know people like to blame Disney, and there's plenty of blame to go around, but the problem existed before that. Let's look at the 2010s. Aside from Lego Star Wars and a bunch of crappy mobile games, and also Tiny Death Star not crappy, we weren't getting really anything. It was like the era of shovelware for Star Wars, and we've just never gotten back to that golden era, which is why I say we didn't know how good we had it. Star Wars growing up for me, as I've explained throughout this video, was always a brand which was extremely strong when it came to video games. Star Wars games must have made so many fans out of people my age, and also older people as well, people who grew up before the prequels launched, or at least were in their adolescence when they launched. Games were keeping people interested in Star Wars. And I just wonder now how much games could help a brand which honestly needs all the help it can get. The sequels are over. God knows when the next Star Wars movie will come out, but we're just not getting enough. The games we have got are good. The Dark Forces remaster, the Bounty Hunter remaster, those were great launches. Star Wars Hunters is fun, as are the main games like Jedi Survivor. Star Wars Squadrons might be my favorite game of all time, but it's not good enough. And I look at a game like Star Wars Outlaws, which is just not good enough. In 2003, where there's 4 good Star Wars games releasing a year, Star Wars Outlaws is fine, and people play it and they move on. It's a cool little diversion. In 2004, Star Wars Outlaws was the only new Star Wars game we got. It was only the second AAA launch since 2020, so I certainly understand the frustration. Will we even get a Star Wars game this year? I don't know. Bit Reactor's game, the KOTOR remake, Star Wars Eclipse, they're all in various stages of happening or not happening, but I truly believe there is potential for another Star Wars gaming golden age. AAA games have never been more expensive to produce, I understand that. Star Wars is also struggling with streaming and in other aspects. but I think Squadrons proved that there's a desire for AA games. I think the Jedi and Battlefront series under EA proved that if games are at least good enough, people will play, and I just want to see more. Anyway, that's all I got. Let me know your thoughts on all this and more, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.